Oh yeah, that just happened. Now vulnerable and without the powers of Khonshu, Steven and Layla make their way into the pyramid to find the tomb of Amet before Harrow himself does it. But before I probably start with my review of this bonkers episode of Moon Knight, I want you to let me know not only your thoughts on this, how much did it blow your mind, your theories for what is coming next, anything and everything down there. And of course, we talk Moon Knight every single week, so if you love Moon Knight and movies and TV, this is the place to be. So consider clicking that subscribe button so you don't miss any future conversation on Moon Knight and your favorite movies and TV. Obviously, we're going to talk spoilers in this. There's so much to talk about in this episode. You want to talk about those final 10 minutes. I want to talk about those final 10 minutes. But we need to talk about the episode as a whole because this is the Temple of Doom episode. This is hard on the adventure side and hard on the horror side. It brings all those horror vibes back strong into the show. It brings us into the point of no return in the story, and it's an episode that continues to prove how this show is not here for instant gratification. It's committed to long-term storytelling, to changing perspective on what we've seen thus far. It builds on what came before to pay it off long-term, and that is so satisfying, where the deliberate pace continues to build here. And it's an episode that not only does it do all of that with the zombie pharaoh and inside the pyramid and all that, but it's an episode that for the most part gives us a brand new dynamic with Layla working together with Steven in this very compelling love story where the two realize that they are kind of what they've wanted all along, while Marc starts to realize what this whole adventure has cost him, what his choices have cost him. And Steven, amongst all this insanity that he never asked for, that he wasn't prepared for, how that has brought him into Layla's arms, so to speak. The episode obviously opens with the statuette of Khonshu being placed in this kind of corner thing, and we see as it zooms out that there's a ton of gods imprisoned, which begs the question if we're going to see all those gods released by the end of the show. And I think we could see all those gods released by the end of the show very much, and shift and open up the MCU going forward, even though this show so far has stayed very much away. There's a vague mention of Madripoor, but even that doesn't make this show MCU specific. We just know that it is. One of my issues with the episode, however, comes right from the beginning as it opens up with Steven on the ground, fainted after using his powers with Khonshu before he was in prison. And throughout this episode, he's constantly arguing with Marc, and he believes the deal to be over. And that didn't come across well for me. I don't get how Steven thinks the deal with Khonshu that Marc had is done. I just don't buy the logic on Steven's part here, where he had this agreement with Marc. Once the deal Marc has with Khonshu is done, once the mission is fulfilled, Marc will give Steven the body, he will give Steven his life back. But I don't get how Steven thinks that right now we're in that moment where the mission is over. And it's creating a lot of interesting friction and a rift between Marc and Steven. We even have that quick conversation as they find the camp outside of the pyramid and everyone is dead, and it starts bringing in those creepy, eerie vibes. And he talks with Marc through a mirror where Steven is kind of taking away what is Marc's, and that includes Layla. We even have the kiss at one point. And so as the two of them make their way down to the pyramid, it's just really fun to see Steven all gleeful because he loves this shit. And so right now he's inside a pyramid. He's exploring tombs and finding hieroglyphics and finding these little clues to make his way inside the pyramid deeper and deeper into finding the tomb of Alexander the Great, who turns out was an avatar of Ahmet. But soon enough, we see this creepy, horrifyingly looking creature bring in one of the cops from episode 2 and just starts cutting him open, and it's horrifying. Not so much because we see like the guts and the blood like super rated R. No, it's precisely because we don't see a lot of it. We just hear the noise, the grunts and the moans of pain throughout, and we hear what is clearly happening. And it's just super creepy. I love that this episode does that. The hardest hardcore horror vibes are in this episode, and soon enough Layla stumbles on something, and so she has to run away in one direction, Steven has to run away with another, and so we allow them to do their own thing, we allow them to develop on their own. We have Layla fanning off against this zombie pharaoh creature, and she eventually gets the best of it, but Harrow finds her inside this pyramid, and he continues to exploit her vulnerability through truth. That's what continues to be so compelling about this guy, is that he doesn't lie, he doesn't physically attack anyone, he sees himself as the savior, and because he sees Marc Spector as a sinner, he continues to use the vulnerability that he has to attack him and those around him. And so he reveals that Marc was involved in Layla's dad's murder, and now there have been a few clips on some of the spots where we see Marc with the MoonKnight suit, no mask, it's just Oscar Isaac in front of a ton of bodies laid on the ground. We have not seen this in any of the episodes, but I'll get to how it connects in my explanation of the ending in a bit. And so we cut to Steven still arguing with Marc as he finds the tomb of Alexander the Great. As he opens it up, has to take the statue of Ahmet from inside Alexander's throat. It feels like this great victory, but soon enough he's confronted by Layla, and quickly after that, Harrow arrives, and we have one of the most shocking moments we have ever seen, where Harrow commits his first act of violence on camera. Like throughout the show, we have seen this guy as this patron saint of peace. He's just the Avatar. He wants to take violence and sin and evil out from the world. But he sees Marc as the evil. He sees Steven as the evil. Khonshu as the evil after last week's final scene, which was so great. And he shoots Steven. As Steven just throws this axe and immediately, boom. And Steven falls into this water. There's this great visual as he's falling and sinking deeper into the water. And then we cut to the hospital. And there are so many juicy details in these final 10 minutes, guys. You have to rewatch this episode. I rewatched this episode like 4 times, these final 10 minutes 4 times while I had this episode on my Disney Plus account to just dissect all the details. First of all, it's a really shocking turn. Like this episode, how it ends, these final 10 minutes, you just have so much to absorb. One of the doctors is the policeman that we just saw die earlier in the episode. Another one is the security guard to Midnight Man from last week. The other is the other cop from episode 2. There's so many details. Even the guy who's playing a statue, the homeless man for the first 2 episodes, he's in there. He's one of the patients. Layla is one of the patients. And obviously Marc is one of the patients. It's very interesting that we spend this episode with Steven, but when we cut to this hospital, we don't cut to Steven, we cut to Marc. I think that tells us a lot about where this show and this character naturally is going on the broad scope of a season 2 or the grand MCU going forward. And obviously Harrow is the doctor here. He's a psychiatrist trying to help Marc discern what is fiction, what is in his mind from reality, as after sinking in the water we slowly fade in and focus in on this old movie where this Indiana Jones-like explorer named Stephen Grant is finding these tombs, and it's all so fascinating that eventually Marc gets the best out of the doctors. He gets to run away for a little bit, and he finds one sarcophagus that has Stephen in it. They reunite, they're working together, they try to put the pieces together of what's the last thing you remember, and they both remember that Harrow shot them. And as soon as they try to make their way out, and there's a second sarcophagus in there, and we'll get to that in a bit. Tawaret comes in, this great hippopotamus lady that freaks both Marc and Steven out. Now, for those who don't know, in Egyptian mythology, Tawaret is the goddess of childbirth and fertility. I don't think she's serving that exact purpose in here, but now let's talk about this ending. Let's talk about where this is leading to. This is Tawaret, who's trying to help Marc, Steven survive. She's putting them in this illusion for him to bring the pieces of himself together so he can survive, and she's delaying the fact that he's dying by showing him this illusion. This is what happened as well, very similarly to the Jeff Lemire run in the comics. It's the comic run I keep recommending you guys read. It's the comic run that this show is most faithfully adapting, which obviously brings us into this final scene, because I think it's fascinating that to survive, to become whole again, to have a full life going forward, I think we're going to find Jake Lockley here. Jake Lockley imprisoned in a second sarcophagus, and we're going to see a lot of things that we've already seen in the next episode, I feel, from Jake Lockley's perspective, that is going to restructure and have us reinterpret a lot of what we've heard, of what we saw. And only when these three personalities of Steven, Marc, and Jake come together can this character be whole again. I think we're also going to find out that either Marc was killed by his supposed fellow mercenaries, and to survive, he accepted the gift of Khonshu and became MoonKnight. And because he wasn't able to control his power yet, he ended up killing innocent people as well at that time. And one of those innocent people was Layla's dad. Or my other option is Jake Lockley is the one that did that. And because his mind was so guilty and so broken because of that trauma after it, that's when his mind broke. That's when Marc and Steven came into the picture. That's when Khonshu came into the picture to exploit this man who was so broken mentally, psychologically. Because one of the best elements that this show has brought us is how the storytelling mirrors the fractured mind of Steven. So in a way, it feels like right now, with these final 10 minutes in episode 4, we're seeing it for the first time. No facade, no anything. We're seeing how fractured he really is. This whole hospital scenery is all a reflection of the help he actually needs. And I think by bringing together Marc, Steven, and the Jake Lockley personality, that we're going to see all the fragments where he was in this show all along. And through that, bring himself back to life, make himself whole. I think that's really beautiful, where we see, hopefully, these three personalities working together, embracing one another, giving themselves a new lease on life, and maybe seeing a whole new side of them. And what we saw last week when Marc and Steven were working together, that was just a glimpse of what the three of them can accomplish. I still think the Jake Lockley character will be a very interesting dynamic, where Marc is going to clearly be the bad man with a conscience, Steven is the good man, but I think Jake is going to be the darkest of the personalities. That's my theory, that's my interpretation. We're gonna kind of see a good, bad, and the ugly, but it's all the three personalities in this one body, and I cannot wait to see what new dynamic Jake brings, because all the dynamics that this show has offered thus far have all been so interesting, so fresh, and they make every episode feel brand new and offer something entirely different that the previous one did. And this ending certainly did that for this episode. And I think next week is going to be that way once again. I think next week we're going to yet again have a very horror-centric episode, because I think we're going to spend the most time of the episode in the hospital. And hospitals are inherently a creepy place to be. And with the help of Tawaret, I think that's what's going to bring Marc, Steven, and Jake together. And I just like this show as this kind of examination of a man's relationship to a god. In this case, being Steven and Marc with Khonshu. And it just shows how much faith and belief in these higher deities just takes away from you. I think there's something really interesting, theologically speaking, in this show. And I think as we head into the final 10 episodes, we're going to open a lot of doors for that discussion. I think next week we're going to have a walkthrough through Marc's past, through his memories, and Jake will be revealed to reinterpret all of that. Also, there's a ton of theories right now that Jake has been in the show thus far. In episode 2, when the guy looks at the security camera, that's not Marc, that's Jake. In episode 3, when he's chasing all the followers of Harrow around, that's supposedly Jake. There's just a ton that this show, with these final 10 minutes, has us question about what we've seen thus far, and I freaking love it. Because not only do I have more questions about what I've seen, I have no idea where this show is going next. And that's fantastic. I love that this show keeps challenging our notion of where it's heading down, mixing in all these genres, blending in all these story structures, and have us figuring out this puzzle along with our characters, that we keep reinterpreting what we know about them. We keep having to ask questions about who these characters are, what they want, and that's fascinating because they are themselves puzzles that we're trying to figure out. And these final 10 minutes are the best thing this show did for me. I think I still overall prefer episode 3, but Moonlight episode 4, and I say this without having seen 5 or 6, has cemented itself as a fundamentally great show and one that shifted narrative structure when it comes to the MCU, where it escaped the formula. It's darker in tones. It's a brand new genre for them to tackle. It's got a fundamentally morally gray character, an anti-hero that we've never had anything like it before. From the complex story to the mature writing, the compelling, flawed characters, Moonlight just keeps challenging and shifting our notions of what we know about this show, of where we can see it going. It's a show that just keeps on surprising, but also elevating itself and the material it's delivering. I think this episode is all kinds of great when it comes to what this show is delivering, what this show has promised us thus far. And this ending is just another example that to me this show continued to deliver for 4 weeks. So I'm just very surprised, I'm very excited, and I'm done listening that this show is just the same old thing again, because it clearly isn't. This show came in to be something different, and it succeeded at that. So I'm done seeing that it follows the formula, because it doesn't. It's a fascinating character study, an incredibly complex mystery that I just love figuring out and reinterpret week to week. But those are only my thoughts on Moonlight episode 4. Talk to me about that ending. Talk to me about your theories going into next week. Anything and everything down there. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for joining me every single week. If you just found me, go check out the previous reviews. They're right now up on the channel. And my review for The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is now up as well. That's why that Nicolas Cage face is right back there. I want to thank you for watching once more, and my channel member Bruna for supporting this channel. Make sure if you want to support the channel to click that link below. I hope to see you in future videos, and of course next week when we talk Moonlight episode 5. So until the next one, love each other and love the movies.